Bom, continuando a questão de o que é filosofia, afinal, I will continue in English. My aim here is to develop a descriptivist characterization of philosophy. That is, a characterization restricted to the sense of philosophy in academic philosophy from the tradition to the present days, but essentially from the tradition. Before doing this, I wish to get a look at the concept of philosophy, of the analytic philosophy of language, since it seems that analytic philosophers have changed the object of philosophy from the world to concepts. We learn that analytic philosophy of language had as its goal to analyze our conceptual structures. Strawson, for example, defines his descriptive metaphysics as a description of our actual structures of thought. Historically, there are two kinds of analytic philosophy. A. Philosophy of ideal language, inspired by Frege Logik. Example, the earlier Wittgenstein, the Wittgenstein of the Tractatus, Russell, from the logical atomism, and even the later Russell, and the Wiener Kreis. And B. Philosophy of ordinary language, inspired by careful examination of our uses of words. This is from the later Wittgenstein, Oxford School, Strawson, Ryle, and Austin, and particularly Austin. Here is Austin. Austin is another philosopher. However, it's better to formulate this distinction in a broader way as that of A. Formally inspired philosophy includes Davison, Kripke, versus B. A pragmatically inspired philosophy, which includes Searle, Grice, Tugendhat, Recanati, and so on. This is broader and not so limited because Grice, for example, was a critiker of ordinary language philosophy, especially Austin. A very clear definition of the central interests of analytic philosophy is the following due to Ernst Tugendhat. Philosophy is the analytic elucidation of the network formed by the concepts constitutive of our understanding of the world. This is a very clear definition and interesting. According to Tugendhat, we learn all concepts implicitly by means of positive and negative examples, not by means of definitions. Because of this, we are not aware of how to define these concepts that we use with, or concept words that we use with implicit or tacit meaning. For this reason, we do not gain awareness of the conceptual rules of our language, which remain tacit. A very simple example, definition of a chair. What's chair? A non-vehicular seat with backrest made for only one person to sit at each time. This you can find almost completely defined in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Non-vehicular because it's not the seat of a car, of an airplane, because these seats have backrest and are not chairs. And with backrest because it's not a bunk, for example. Made for only one person to sit, it's not a sofa each time. And this is essentially what's a chair. Philosophical examples are much more complex concepts. Augustine asked, "What is time?" When asked if I know what it is, I know. When asked me, "What is time?" I don't know anymore. Or the definition of propositional knowledge as justified through belief from Plato. And after Goethe's problem, it constitutes a whole field of epistemology called analysis of knowledge. What is truth? There are 30, 40 or more theories of truth. And the more plausible seems to be the correspondence theory of truth. But what kind of correspondence? The answer would be a structural isomorphism. Now, how to define it more precisely? What's the role of coherence in this game? Typical of philosophy is Carnap's formal way of speak, in which we highlight linguistic conceptual structures. Examples. We have a material way of speaking, and we ask what are numbers. But in analytic philosophy, our question will be somewhat different, highlighting linguistic aspects. What is the meaning of sentences containing numbers? Another example. The world is made of facts, not of things. In the formal way of speaking, typical of linguistic analytic philosophy, it will be the concept word is so understood that by means of it, a system of facts, not of things, is referred to. Then comes an objection from Brian Major. Philosophy cannot have as its object only concepts or meanings. It must also deal with the world, as traditional philosophy did. The answer from a positivist is from Ayer. The distinction between is about the world and is about the language isn't at all sharp, because the world is the world as we describe it, the world as it figures in a system of concepts, and exploring our system of concepts, we are at the same time exploring the world, as in the case of the examples above. This seems well justified when you see the theses of analytical philosophers. Examples. Wittgenstein. Atomic states of affairs are combinations of objects wholly devoid of complexity and indestructible. Well, this is about the world. Armstrong, another analytic philosopher. Scientific laws are relations of nomological necessity holding between universals. These universals must be attached with their instantiations in the world. Well, Kripke. The reference of a proper name is given by a causal-historical chain that begins with the baptism of its bearer, and these occur in the world. The best answer to Mage's objection can be found in Quine's concept of semantic assent. A pervasive characteristic of analytic philosophy is what we call semantic assent. By means of semantic assent, conceptual aspects of our expressions are focused in order to make fine distinctions explicit and to prevent linguistic confusion. This is the reason of the so-called formal way of speaking, because we will not make errors, so many errors, if we consider the fine distinctions, linguistic distinctions, and we make these distinctions explicit, and this demands semantic assent. Semantic assent is reminiscent to Carnap's formal way of speaking. The difference is that semantic assent is applicable everywhere. For instance, there are wombats in Tasmania. This is in the material mode, but in the formal mode will be wombats is true of some creatures in Tasmania. If there is any point in it, says Quine. The difference, Quine says, is that semantic assent is more useful in philosophical connections, not about the wombats in Tasmania or about scientific theories. We could do the same with sciences, and sentences of sciences we can put them in a formal mode with semantic assent. For example, Einstein was analyzing the concept word of simultaneity when applied to observers moving at great relative speed. Hawkins made an important analysis of the concept of black holes, or the concept of natural evolution was first rightly analyzed by Charles Darwin. Mendel analyzed the concept of gene, while Watson and Kripke analyzed the concept of desoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. Although this is completely unnecessary, the conclusion is that, apart from some new methodological devices like the application of symbolical logic, the attention to the pragmatics, the use of modal logic, along with other methodologies, analytic philosophy of language does not distinguish itself from traditional philosophy. We could make it clearer by saying that in doing philosophy, we use semantic metalanguage and not syntactic metalanguage. Consider the contrasting examples. A. Krakow is a name word with 6 letters. B. Krakow is a word naming a city located 50 degrees north of the equator and 20 degrees of the meridian of Greenwich. In B, we use semantic metalanguage by means of which we speak not only about words but about what words mean, and in this way, indirectly, even about the world itself. Moreover, we can say that the traditional philosophy also did conceptual analysis. For instance, Plato's typical question in his dialogues had the form, "What is X?" where in the place of X was a concept word like justice, knowledge, good. What is justice? What is knowledge? What is the beauty? And so on. An example, in the dialogue Thetetus, knowledge is analyzed as true belief with a logos, a reason, a justification, and this analysis was fully accepted until 1963. Conclusion. There is no distinction of object proper of philosophy as conceptual analysis. Hence, one could compare the emergence of analytic philosophy with the post-Aristotelian philosophy during the Middle Ages. They have absorbed the Aristotelian organon, which comprised a theory of proposition, a theory of deductive reasoning, the syllogistic, remarks about the nature of sciences, a sketch about inductive reasoning, a classification of fallacies, and so on. And all that stuff was assumed in the Middle Ages as belonging to the art of argumentation, the dialectics, and the students of philosophy should learn the dialectics, the art of argumentation, and these views, these theories, these methodological devices. Well, And in the same way as Aristotle introduced different methodological devices, new methodological devices that influenced the way philosophy was made in the Middle Ages and later, the Frege and other philosophers have introduced methodological devices that influenced the way we do philosophy today. And this is the secret of analytic philosophy, the whole secret. Conclusion. Analytic philosophy does not show a new object of philosophy. It is the same philosophy in a new form and therefore not the privileged place for the investigation of the most proper nature of philosophy. If we wish to investigate the nature of philosophy, we need to search somewhere else.